Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship, MILE.
Great. Thank you very much, Ali. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you very much to the Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship for giving me yet another opportunity to share something which I am personally very, very passionate about. This is basically what the subject is. It's called Profits Through Compassion. Is it possible? I think that's the most important question that we'll come to more towards the end of this little webinar that we have. Going with the tradition, and thank you very much again once for the lovely introduction, Ali. Just to add a little bit more, why on compassion? Because this is something a lot of people ask me, that being a business and an organizational development consultant, where does compassion fit in? So basically, I'm a fellow of International Center for Compassionate Organizations, as Ali highlighted. I'm also a board member of Charter for Compassion Pakistan. I'm an advisory fellow, International Institute of Compassionate Cities. And as we speak, we are in the process of setting up a strategic business unit, which will be a joint venture between Charter for Compassion Pakistan and Fundworks Global, with the primary objective of compassionating businesses. So this is why primarily I am here. So I think more than anything else, the subject of compassion and my connection to compassion is something which is much more important. The objective of this webinar, by the end of the 40 minutes, 35 to 40 minutes that we have, if you could highlight and identify the objectives that you see on your screen right now, largely our purpose and objective of this webinar would be achieved, which is to discover the 12 compassion indicators. This is based on which the research was conducted, and I will be sharing that with you. Realize the chaos in culture, which again means that I'm not necessarily going to tell you exactly what's going to happen, but probably give you an opportunity to reflect and realize what happens when your culture does not have compassion moving forward, and also realize and learn why major HR initiatives like leadership development programs, coaching and mentoring programs fail in an organization because they don't contribute towards authentic development. And again, you could yourself realize the cost of not knowing this and the impact that it has on businesses that would determine whether you could actually make profits from compassion or no. Let me begin by sharing with you how my story goes by. Whenever I've been speaking of compassion, these are the most common kind of remarks that I've got, and I've been part of this movement, this global movement of compassion since 2010. When I started speaking about it, these are the common kind of responses that I would get. For example, one of the most amazing ones was, when my numbers are not coming in, your compassion can wait for a week. You know, that's what one person says. He said, by the 26th, if my numbers are not coming, your compassion can wait. I've heard people say, what does compassion have to do with business? Interestingly, this is a comment made by somebody in a very senior position in an educational institution, asking me when I asked for help for the research, telling me, making this remark that compassion has nothing to do with business, and if I'm so passionate about it, why don't I do it myself? And I thank that gentleman for that. I've also heard, so you want us to do business compassionately and harm profitability for shareholders, which again, if you think about it, is the perception being compassion brings in a lot of fluff and takes you away from the profits. Some encouraging remarks too. It is tough. All the best to you. What world are you living in? And if we show compassion, our people take us for granted. And I'm sure a number of you would have similar remarks, not necessarily disencouraging, but also, as we say, the realities of life that we face on a regular basis. This is something that I've heard, and interestingly enough, to date, I hear this. About 2 months back, I met an HR director of a very leading organization, got a similar comment, what does compassion have to do with businesses? And all in all, what I realize is it's how you define compassion and its relationship with business that makes all the difference. If you think it's all about fluff and it is allowing people to take you for granted, if it is about compromising on ethics and values, the definition needs to be redefined. It's a challenge of how to bring in compassion into the business. This is how, by the way, it all started off. I was busy doing my own consulting and doing my own things, and that is when a gentleman from the Charter for Compassion got in touch with me, and he highlighted how important it is for the educated lot to think of compassion. And it took me about 6 months to realize, and I went on a discovery and realization path myself to understand why is compassion such an important subject. Why is it that people consider compassion so important? Even the educated people. I mean, we are nice people, we are decent, we are respectful, we understand empathy, we practice good leadership practices, we all train well in organizations. Then why focus on compassion in particular? And that is when the process, and then I've started realizing that most of the people had actually become apathetic cynics. Bad news would stop having an impact on them. If anything, it's another day. As opposed to taking, as they would say, take the bull by the horn and moving forward, what I've realized is people actually taking the negativity for granted. And if anything, this negativity multiplies, it spreads, and it doesn't really contribute towards the overall good of the environment that we live in. And as we go into more research, we find out greater things. For example, the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education at Stanford University brought together leaders in business and academia to talk about the role of compassion in business. Researchers concluded that the workplaces which are more compassionate have more satisfied and stress-free employees with higher levels of employee engagement and loyalty. That's where the connection started making sense. That if you are looking for people and team members with a high engagement, what are you giving to them over and above what perhaps any other company could be giving to them? And that's when we started researching more, we started finding out more. Interestingly, organizations that claim to have a great culture driven by values may often falter when it comes to how they deal with their people, vendors, agencies, and other third parties. In our experience of over the years with affiliates of numerous Fortune 500 companies, the best companies, in order to guard their own interests, often disregard the needs of external partners. If you are a player, if you're a compassionate organization, it needs to be across the board. It cannot be restricted to one. If anything, that's what the future of OD is. Organization development has evolved over the years, and I'm not going to go into details of that, but very briefly, from just focusing on what functional responsibilities of an individual are, you are today looking at the impact an organization has on things and the environment and the surroundings around them. So this is basically how it all started off. And today, if you're looking at it, a lot of organizations globally have identified compassion as one of the key competitive advantages that they need to focus on as they move forward. So much so that, for example, let's see, a latest research shows that a compassionate work environment is more conducive to growth. Researchers also concluded that workplaces which are more compassionate have more satisfied and stress-free employees, as I said. And different professors in a conference that was recently held highlighted and presented their research findings over self-compassion, forgiveness, and stress. Executives from Google, Seagate, and other firms are also supported the fact that the compassionate model has borne fruitful results for their organization. Now, again, I could be quoting a lot of examples of companies that have used compassion and given profit. What I would actually like to do is to give you an opportunity to reflect on your own organization and see how much compassion there is. I'll just accelerate a little bit, highlighting a few slides before I very quickly get into the 12 steps. The world is changing, and the key question is, are you changing with the world? And I'll very, very quickly tell you what are the kind of changes you're speaking of when you're speaking of in the world. Your environment is changing. People understand that CSR is just an activity that generally companies use to promote how good they are. So your environment is changing. Environment is getting smarter. Your people are able to see through your actions. So it's very important that you understand what your your overall environment and society is. How does a society look at an organization? Your customers' priority of being enriched. Think about it. This started about 20 years back when if you check into some of the leading eco hotels, they would actually say, request you not to wash the towels, or for that matter, use the towels twice before you sending it over for laundry. These were all trends which were changing. Today, customers' priorities are changing. Today, today customers also want to see how caring you are towards the society. Perhaps, and if you think that it is nothing new, the impact and the need for this is multiplying. Your in-house talent is more aware. Think about it. Why do people need to send their team members on sabbaticals to go and do social work? It is because there is the need for overall good. And if anything, your organization could be that place from where the goodness can start spreading. And most importantly, your own human side is reviving. There is a hunger to do something good, something big, something beyond what you would do in the boundaries of your organization. people want to do something more, something else. And what better way to start off than to start off with people working really close to you? And this is just a personal opinion, you are not necessarily helping those within the organization, but are launching major campaigns outside just to promote how good your organization is. There is something is amiss over there. And that is what I mean, and it's just the reflection that I would like you to have. What we did is, using the 12 steps to compassion as a framework from Karen Armstrong's book, 12 Steps to Compassionate Life, we contextualize it to the business environment. This is the first study, hence the scope is restricted to gauge baseline results. The study was conducted in leading 21 companies across industries, including 2,304 individual respondents. And these respondents, by the way, were middle managers working in organizations. So that is actually how this, we started to give some numbers to it, because when I kept on hearing a lot of complaints that this is a lot of fluff and compassion doesn't happen, we realized we need to create something which is more concrete, something more scientific. It was very painful to convert compassion into science, but if anything, I think it came out beautifully, and today allows us the courage and the strength to talk about it openly. Just in case you don't know who Karen Armstrong is, Karen Armstrong is a 2009 prize winner, and it was her wish to create a Charter for Compassion, which is a document that goes beyond religious, ideological, and national differences. It is supported by leading thinkers across several global themes and traditions. It is a mutual effort of all involved to encourage compassionate thinking and action in our global, religious, moral, and political life. If you're interested in the detailed report, the site is given below on this slide. As you can see, it is available on compassionorg.net. And basically the 12 steps that we are speaking about, these are the 12 steps. Embodying compassion, organizational culture. What we will be doing is we'll be going through these in relatively more detail, and we'll also keep it engaging. My request is from everybody, please take a paper and a pencil in your hand. This will actually help you go through the process and also probably derive some direct value from listening to this webinar. So a paper and a pen, please. I'll wait for about 30 seconds. If you don't have, you could just arrange for one very quickly, please. That's 20 seconds. You have last 10 seconds. Please get a paper and a pen. I can't see you, but listen, let's be fair. It'll be fun playing the game.
Folks, you might as well open the notepad on your desktop.
Perfect.
Scroll it down.
Oh, yeah, you could also do it. I'm still stuck up in old technology. Thanks, Ali. Okay, so let's play. Each section, so what I'll do is I'll take you through the 12 steps. Each 12 steps is divided into 3 areas of focus. What I would like you to do is, as I try explaining and going through those steps, my request would be that you start thinking and give your organization a score. And again, if you think that I'm going too fast, we can always come back to it later on through question and answers, or for that matter, the slides are available at Mile, at the Webrary, I think that's what earlier I noticed you call them. So it's available. You can always come back to it and identify, think about it, and then give your organization a score. But this is what it is. The scoring needs to be 1 to 10. 1 means never heard of it. 10 means primarily that you are role models of this behavior. So that is why it says we are quoted as an example of this particular behavior. So this is how it goes. 12 things that make your businesses compassionate. And there are 3 subpoints. For each subpoint, I would like you to give your score out of 10. So for each of the 12 steps, you get a score out of 30. Let's start. So first one is embodying compassion. What we realize is if you call yourself a compassionate organization, you need to be able to do this. A, compassion is practiced within organization. Irrespective of how you define it, do you even think that your organization is compassionate? How do you define compassion? Again, if you notice, we've been very, very flexible with this research. We've allowed organizations to define compassion for themselves. Broadly, just giving a broad perspective of what compassion is, we've moved on and we've said, okay, you identify now what compassion means to your organization. And use of the word compassion as part of business language, which means, for example, as opposed to just saying we need to serve our customers, are we compassionate towards our customers? Are we compassionate towards each other? Do we understand each other's needs? So use of the word compassion is part of business language. While you're thinking for your own scores, again, as I said, if compassion is practiced within your organization, a score of 1 to 10, never heard of it, 1, If your organization is a role model of it, you give yourself a 10 or anywhere in between. The research that we did is, this is what we discovered. 64% felt that compassion is practiced within an organization. 57% of the organizations were able to define it. 62%, which was very, very encouraging and something that was taken up by surprise, is that they use compassion as part of business language. So that's the first step. So if you're looking at your organization, if you really want to make profit out of compassion, look at yourself from embodying compassion perspective. Moving on, we said let's look at the organizational culture. When you're speaking of the organizational culture, these are the things that you need to focus on. Firstly, is your organization a pleasant one? Do you think it is an organization where people are happy coming to work? The culture of compassion amongst organizational stakeholders, and no compromise on humanity and respect under stress. This is very, very important, because oftentimes people, when it comes to stressful situations, park humanity and respect on a side. They forget what the important principles and values are. And again, I'm sure you would want organizations which are ethical, and an organization that does not react to situations. If you are compromising humanity and respect, you're actually going through a lot of stress. So this is what your organizational culture is. Again, the same thing. Give yourself a score from 1 to 10. So you'll have a total coming out of 30. So this is what your organizational culture is all about. Moving forward, this is something which is of personal interest to me, which is compassion for individuals. Because the concept here being, managers need to understand that promoting a certain kind of organizational culture begins with self. Employees' perceptions today about whether they are growing intellectually and career-wise with their companies compel them to stick around or look for a new job. That's why training focuses on improving skills. Coaching pays attention to grooming a person and helping them develop in their careers. Hence, mentoring and coaching has taken a more critical role in the recent past. In addition, companies also try to provide their employees with more recreational opportunities to keep them engaged. I'm sure your organization has been doing this. I'm sure your organization, if one of those leading organizations, probably also have a daycare center for the new parents. Now, these are very, very important things. And by the way, one of the elements we said we learned, why do leadership and mentoring and coaching programs fail in organizations? It is because what's the point of taking through people in career, presumably trying to show them that we care for your career and provide them coaching, while you're actually just focused on getting your numbers right. I read somewhere that Jack Welch, the conventional definition of manager is somebody who gets work done through people. The modern definition, and somebody quoted Jack Welch for this, was getting people done through work. You can only get people done through work. You can only help them develop if you actually understand what they really want in life. Are you coaching your people just to get the job done, or are you really contributing to their career aspirations? This is what the first point is. Second is healthy lifestyles are encouraged. Which means you're also concerned about the kind of breakfast that people have in the morning. And I'm not exaggerating, but one company that we worked with about 4 years back wanted to do a health survey of their managers, saying that if we are an organization that focuses on good health, how can we have unhealthy people? Again, this is just food for thought. Alignment between personal and organizational goals, very self-explanatory. 67% of the people that we surveyed felt that this happens. Most of them felt, about 33% of the people felt that there was no or little alignment between personal and organizational goals. Next, empathy. This is something which is very important. If you have a question, we could look into that later on, but the ability to distinguish between sympathy and empathy. 65% is a very high score, again, from my perspective. However, this is what the results came in. And the second point is understanding the situation instead of judgmental decision-making, and internal and external customers are respected. It is needless to say, it is important to encourage an empathetic environment at work. Before judging anyone or making decisions, it is important to understand the other person's perspective and try to identify the actual reason of any problem instead of merely assuming based on how things appear to be. For the same purpose, it is important to listen with respect and understanding your people. One should listen to people patiently, just as she would want others to listen to him. Think about it. You want your people to listen to your customers. How often are people listened to within the organization? That's role model leadership. While many people are able to define empathy as putting yourself in other person's shoes, not many people can distinguish, as I said, between sympathy and empathy. It is not about feeling sorry for the other person only. It is feeling sorry yet holding on to your grounds. And as you can see, this is what the percentage. What we really liked is the 82% of internal external customers are respected. This was very promising. And again, if the others are not there and people are doing it, this is probably an indicator that they are trying to do it just because it is a requirement. This is just my guess, because if all the others are low, how could this be so significantly high? If you notice, it's perhaps the first thing that's come in the 80s percentage. So this is where empathy comes in. Sorry, again, please give yourself a score on distinction between sympathy and empathy in your organizations. Understand the situations instead of judgmental decision making. Internal and external customers are respected. Kindly give yourself a scores on 1 to 10 for each one. So you've got a section total out of 30 for empathy. Next, awareness. This is also referred to as mindfulness. Now, those of you who are interested, if you could just Google mindfulness, you will be amazed at the kind of research that is currently being done on the subject. This was the 5th step as recommended by Karen Armstrong. She called it mindfulness. We called it awareness for ease of understanding. Employees and managers need to consciously observe what is happening around them and pay attention to minor details. Targeting social groups is considered common today, and any group deemed different from the rest becomes an easy target. Think about it, the kind of jokes that take place in your organization. Diversity must be respected and encouraged instead of being mocked and joked about. This is something which is very important. Oftentimes we've noticed in different cultures, we end up making fun of other people from other backgrounds. Although it is a joke, if that is being done, that should not be encouraged by the organization. Because one organization that I went to, it was very interesting, speaking to one of the directors, and he said, Farhad, we have a problem. I said, okay, what's the problem? He said, my people are laughing. Came in as a surprise to me at that time, because I said, okay, but that is good. Your people should be laughing. It shows that they're happy at work. He said, no, you're not understanding. They're not laughing with each other. They're laughing at each other. This is very serious. Think about it, what happens in organizations. You go to a cafeteria when in a group of 5 people, one of the most decent one is probably creamed down by the others, and they're having a good time at the expense of one person. That is not necessarily a good culture. It is said that laughter is the language of the angels. It needs to be genuine and authentic as opposed to be driven by the insult of another soul. So this is what awareness is. And progress is appreciated genuinely. Now think about it. You can only do this as a manager, or this can only happen in your organization if managers take time out to catch people doing things right. I repeat, catch people doing things right. Conventionally, the approach has been catch people doing things wrong. Catch them by the neck the minute something goes wrong. That is not a culture that gives results or profits. That, if anything, creates a lot of toxic within the organization and affects employee engagement and discourages people from taking risk and moving forward. So progress is appreciated. Again, you could give your scores on a scale of 1 to 10 of what happens in your organization. Total of awareness out of 30. Action. Again, very critical. Most of the people would like to see a lot of action taking place in organization. A principle-oriented and not person-oriented culture is something which is desirable. A work environment in which one can disagree with his or her superiors and employers. If based on principle, the characteristic of a compassionate organization is taking actions on those bases. That is why corporate values need to be practiced. Focus on accountability, on feedback, of whether people are actually taking feedback, they're not, because these are all indicators that action is being taken. Role models for compassion. This is part of action because everybody would like to see how things are being done. I think it was Confucius who said, I do and I understand. Sometimes if you can't do it, you actually need to see somebody doing it so that you could replicate that same thing. You could mirror those behaviors. This is how the human mind functions. This is how children learn. If you notice, when we do things, and we encourage children to do the same thing, but we need to be able to do it first. You ask children to do something without doing it yourself would always create that confusion in the children's mind. So look at your own organization. Is there focus on accountability and feedback? Sorry for the typo over there. Do you think your corporate values are practiced? What I mean by practice is tangibly something that people can see and practice. And you have role models for compassion in your organization. Moving forward, learning what happens in organization. Again, I'll start off with my favorite, which is learning from mistakes is encouraged. Look, now, as a cliche, many people like to use this. They also say, okay, we learn from our mistakes, we make mistakes, we learn from them, and we grow. But not necessarily practice in its true spirit. While at the same time, people also need to understand that you learn from your mistakes. If you're repeating the same mistakes, you're not necessarily learning from the same mistake. So what I'm not in any way encouraging is that a person keeps on making mistakes and you keep them with you in the team for long, because they then do not provide the kind of culture you want for an organization. I mean, there was a very interesting quotation that says, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. How can I allow the same thing to happen to me again? So this is what learning from mistakes is encouraged. I'll come to the first one over here. 68% of the organization we surveyed say there was an opportunity given for self-reflection, which means when things go wrong, do you at least take a moment, a step back, and you ask people why it went wrong, what could they have done to change it? Was it even, do they even think that they were responsible for what went wrong? I mean, think about it. Accusing people is perhaps the easiest thing to do. You have somebody walking into your room, you accuse them, blame them, give them a shut-up call, they leave. There has been no impact. There has been no impact because the person never took the responsibility for it. Whereas self-reflection, even if it is not in the domain of the person, if it's something that that person could have done, you have learning taking place. And finally, change and innovation is a must in a learning organization. In an organization where you have compassion, you encourage learning on a continuous basis. You keep creating new benchmarks of performances and things that people have done. Encourage people to discover new things. For those of you who want a more scientific proof to this, Tuckman's model of forming, storming, norming, and performing, one of the behaviors highlighted at a team which is at a performing level would primarily be very, very innovative. It's a open to taking risks, sharing ideas, taking responsibility, and delivering on results based on the values and guidelines set off by the organization. Again, kindly give yourself a score from 1 to 10 on the learning element. Communication is something that we're already aware of. I'm not speaking of body language, tone, and words. What we're actually speaking of is how do people communicate within organization? If in your organization, I'm using the first one, use of reason in an argument versus seniority. If in the conflict situation in your organization, people are using seniority, education, and experience as the right to be correct and over and above anybody else, you do not have a compassionate communication culture. In a culture where you have compassion, communication is done through reasoning. You talk about things. The objective is in no way trying to pressurize the other person to listen to you. Again, I'll repeat, based on these three things: seniority, who's the manager; education, I come from a better university; or experience, how long have you been around? If that's the kind of comments you hear, your organization needs help when it comes to reasoning and creating a culture where communication needs to be improved compassionately. Second, discussions and dialogues are preferred over debates. Can your organization differentiate when two people are in a conversation that whether they are discussing and dialoguing or are they trying to debate? It's very simple. When you're trying to debate, you're just trying to prove yourself right one way or the other. If your conversations and meetings have more debates where there's a lot of self-protection, you're not necessarily entering into a compassionate way of discussing people, something that people would never appreciate. Individual self-esteem and self-respect are valued very simply. So when you're communicating, you make sure you do not underplay or say things which undermine the esteem of other people in your organization. Again, you could give yourself a score from 1 to 10. The research that we did showed that 67%, 33%, I'll reverse the order, as 33% of the organizations did not use reason to communicate. Moving forward, we have concern for everyone. Okay, when you're speaking of, now this is how it's different from compassion for individuals, separate from concern for everyone. Here you're actually expanding and you're going out more towards the organization as opposed to specific individuals. An explanation is given when a request is not facilitated. There are a number of, you've probably gone through customer service training programs where they keep on teaching why you should not say no to a customer. And the customer is always right, you do not say no, the customer is the king. The fact that all of us know there are times you have to say no, you cannot necessarily accept everything. And for that matter, even managers cannot accept everything with any request or all the requests that come to a person. There are times you have to say no. The key over here is how do you say no? If you are able to give a reason, something that makes sense. You're facilitating the process as opposed to giving people a shut-up call. It would be difficult for people to understand. That's the other side of the story. However, are you making the effort to help people understand why you cannot always say yes? This is where you have to develop your communication competencies, your influencing competencies, your ability to negotiate. So a lot of competencies are required to actually be able to do this. But this is something which is very, very important. You just can't blame it. For example, as a customer, how would you feel if the service provider turns around and says, sorry, this is not what our policy says? That is not what customers want to hear. So this is what the first point is. An explanation is given when a request is not facilitated. CSR has a strategic role to play. You can see how your contribution to the society is eventually impacting everybody strategically to the organization. And employee satisfaction surveys are used to monitor and improve performance. Now, no hard feelings to my fraternity members from HR, but what we've discovered, what we've learned over the years is people actually find employee engagement exercises pretty useless. Again, please do not take it to heart. I'm not saying all organizations are like that, but the question is, once you've got the employee satisfaction survey scores or employee engagement scores, what do you do with it? People oftentimes in organizations don't really know what you're doing with it. So it becomes a useless exercise that people go through, and it's just very convenient to say things are going well as opposed to saying things are going bad. So everybody's very happy when you're looking at the report, but those reports need to be analyzed, evaluated, assessed. Strategies need to be made based on those inputs. Then strategic indicators need to be set looking at what those employee engagement scores are. Training programs and development opportunities need to be focused on trying to get those employee engagement scores up very, very scientifically. And people need to be told why the organization is taking initiative so that they can understand and find the link between employee engagement and the exercises that HR tends to do. So concern for everyone. Knowledge, understanding of transnational diversity is encouraged. You're not making fun of people from other cultures again. So this is not restricted to what happens only in the organization, but even internationally. Diversity is defined for our business. Oftentimes we realize that people do, just because they're coming from the same country and same religion, they feel there is no need for diversity. There is significant need to understand diversity even in that. Interdepartmental challenges are discussed openly. This is again a point of knowledge because this encourages process alignment within departments in an organization. And if you think about it, there are always interdepartmental challenges. I'll give you a simple example. When I do training programs and we ask organizations, we ask, for example, non-salespeople, different functions, finance and the production and the R&D and the HR. We say, what do salespeople do? The most common response is they just roam around, they loaf around, they've got nothing better to do. You ask salespeople what the others do. For example, what do the finance people do? The most common response is stopping our claims, delaying reimbursement, delaying payments not being made on time. This is nothing but a gap in perspective. How can you have an organization which respects each other, which does not have knowledge? Think about it. You can't really respect people or environment or departments if you don't really have the knowledge. So that is why in compassionate organizations, knowledge needs to be shared and understood for everybody in the organization to actually start respecting. And again, a very, very low score, 66% for an organization. Of a score of interdepartmental challenges are not discussed openly is about 34%, is a very, very high percentage to have. Recognition, credit is given where due. Again, if you're an effective manager, you know what your people are doing and you're able to catch people doing the right thing and for the right reason. Talent is given an opportunity. If you recognize talent, based on merits, people are given opportunity, not because the person is somebody you like, is a blue-eyed boy, or just hangs around with the boss much too often. Negative labeling is discouraged as a part of recognition, again, because oftentimes we see people using terms and words which are not positive and eventually have an impact on people and their moods and their reactions to their relationships. For example, last week I was in a training program and I asked people, can you give me a few examples of labels that you give? And one of the most not one of the most interesting ones, but the most common one was tube light. So somebody who doesn't understand things. I think about it. Every time you call a person tube light, the chances are he's going to live up to that expectations very, very, very frequently because that's what you expect that person to do. So negative labeling does not necessarily help. That is recognition. And finally, the 12 steps of compassionate organization is competition. Raising standards as opposed to harmful competition. Oftentimes we've noticed a lot of people quote war and war stories to inspire teams to outperform the other people. We heard the art of war. as the strategy being used. What was that? A guerrilla warfare is required in marketing. Ugh, too painful, too violent. Think about it. Why are you in business? Are you in business to give value to the customer, or are you in business to harm the competition? If you want to harm the competition, it's eye for an eye, it's slap for a slap. It's a counter strategy for a counter strategy. That is not what you're there for, am I right? You're there to make business, you're there to give value to the customer. Focus on customer happiness, try giving maximum value to the customer. It doesn't really make a difference what your competition does. As long as you know you're constantly changing, improving, growing, setting new standards. While I'm not saying ignore the competition, but don't base your decisions purely on competition. Don't just be satisfied by doing a little better than what they did. Maybe a little better than what they did is not even something that your customers expect from you. So raising standards as opposed to harmful competition. There is a clear distinction between dislike and disrespect. Again, compassion does not mean you go to a tree-hugging feeling that you start dancing with everybody, share everything with your competition. Obviously, they're competition. You've got a business to run. But at the same time, you cannot be disrespectful towards the other organization, the employees of the other organization, the products that they have, or the customers that they have. You may choose to dislike. That is something I cannot say, comment on much. It's a personal choice. But being disrespectful is definitely not on. And finally, business ethics takes priority. You decide what are you actually doing. This is where you take into account your own strategy, your own business goals, and decide what needs to be done. Now, who wouldn't want an ethical business? Interestingly enough, if you're looking at all the 12 steps, you've just gone through the 12. If you're looking at all the 12, these are something which are very, very business. I don't know, for most of you who've never, if in case you've never heard of this, think about it. These are all business terms. These are business scenarios. This is something that your organization probably speaks of a lot of time, but not necessarily in the umbrella on the canvas called compassion. Compassion is the way to go. This, if anything, as I said, the future of OD, this is what the future of organization development will be. The kind of environment you give to your people all day, 9 to 5, they sit at your work, they go back out into the open environment. That open environment, if they were unhappy during the day, will multiply in their relationships outside. Does not create the kind of environment that you would like your business to grow in. You know, one person said something very interesting. I think he quoted Bill Gates, I'm not too sure, but he said the best way of getting rich is to make sure people around you are getting rich as well. Which means if you want to have a great organization, a very successful business, make sure your environment is also great and having a successful environment. When everything grows, you have, your organization has nothing, no other choice but to grow. And who else to focus on first than your own people? They deserve to have that environment. This is something that Lloyd Dean, President and CEO of Dignity Health, said. He said, compassion and kindness aren't expensive, but the yield is priceless. Think about it. For everything that we've said, how much would it cost you to do these things? Literally nothing. Last evening I had a session where I had a similar topic, and one of the gentlemen walked up to me and he said, you know, it's interesting, we do it all the time, but we never realize it because we take it for granted. And because you take it for granted, you don't really realize what you're actually doing. If you don't know what you're doing, you fail to enjoy that moment. Think about it. Think about how can you make your business compassionate. You do an evaluation, find out what are the areas to focus on. Tell your people you're a compassionate organization. It's a global movement. It's happening all over the world today. Coming back to the question, would it give me profits? Tell me something. Calculate the cost of ineffective practices, suffocating culture, where you often hear statements like we wish we did not have an open door policy because we have a bulldog sitting inside. So that's a suffocating culture. Nasty manager behaviors. An organization where information is hoarded, which means delays in decision making and people not feeling part or parcel of the organization. Faking relationship with customers just because you have to serve the customer, you're following an SOP where you really don't care for what the customer actually wants. And you have team members who put Facebook updates on Monday morning, which goes something like OMGIM. That's, oh my goodness, it's Monday. Look at the cost of that. You tell me the cost of some of the things I've highlighted, and I'll be, inshallah, be able to tell you what the profit is of your business. So again, as you can notice, we've tried to bring in a lot of science into an otherwise very soft subject, because this is what organizations primarily need. They've realized that they need to have organizations that make profits, but they make profits as a byproduct of who they actually are and how they are actually leading the organization. The Scott Greens, the chairman of the board of directors and ex-CEO of Juniper Networks, once remarked, and I quote, "I believe that the best way to develop a high-performance business for the long haul is to develop a caring, high-trust, relationship-centric culture. These cultures nurture a sense of purpose, of connection, and of compassion, where the business results we can measure are not the first priority of the enterprise, but rather a consequence enjoyed when leaders and teams practice the primary goal of building a caring community every day." You get an opportunity to create that caring community every day. What is the benefit of engaged employees? You know best, you know what it is, you know how the profit is. So I think as opposed to asking if you could achieve profits through compassion, is it possible? I think you could just turn it around and just say it is possible. It's a question of just reversing your mindset and looking at it from a different perspective. With that, I have come to the end of my presentation. This research is something that we did last year. It's available on Facebook. My request is please go forward and like the site. There's a lot of information being uploaded. There are videos as well on the site that you could review. We'll be more than happy to work with you, discuss these things, because as I said, it's a personal desire to bring into compassion in every organization, in every industry across the globe. Personal desire. Let's see if we can make it happen together. With that, thank you very much. Ali, over to you. I talk about.
Okay, thank you very much, and a very, very passionate presentation also, I must say. Folks, we are now open for Q&A. If you have any questions, you could either put it in the question box, or you could raise your hand, and I'll give you an opportunity to speak to Farhad Karamally. Let me go straight to the caller, please. We have a couple of hands already raised, so let me go. The first caller we have, Brother Hamid Ali. Brother Hamid Ali, if you can hear us, could you please introduce yourself, where you're calling from, and ask the question? Brother Hamid Ali, can you hear us? Sir, you raised your hand. I believe, brother, you have muted yourself, because I see that your audio is muted by... Okay, now you're unmuted yourself. Could you please speak up? Okay, unfortunately we cannot hear Brother Hamid. Let me see, raise his hand, but his mic is still muted. So let me move to the question box. We have an interesting questions. Okay, the first question, employees always look how compassionate an organization is to reward their employees. How compassionately organizations should communicate reward policies? Considering on realistic grounds, employers are shy to talk about bonuses and rewards.
Okay, interesting question. Again, you need to think about it from the perspective that when you're speaking of reward, you're actually it's like giving meat to a mammal. That is the reason why you're actually rewarding them. You see, there are organizational policies and there are things that need to be done. Reward is something, and this is just a personal opinion, is a very explicit need that individuals can highlight. It's very convenient to say, how much will I get? What are the bonus will I get? What kind of salaries would I get? It's a very clear-cut indicator. However, there are implicit needs. Think about it. Would a person take on bonus and take a whack at the back every day in the morning? What about things like self-respect and self-esteem? Using Maslow's hierarchy of need, there will be a limit to how much a person can actually tolerate the abuse in terms of their self-esteem. So again, if this is an organizational policy, they can decide how much to reward. But my personal recommendation would never be that that cash rewards be mixed with a compassionate organization or a work culture. That's just a policy. It's a business decision that a business needs to decide. So yeah, again, I said it's a question of very explicit and implicit. I'll give you a very simple example. Yeah, I'm gonna forget that, but I hope I was clear enough. No point in linking compassion with cash.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Move to another caller. We have our regular caller, Dr. Muhammad Farid. Doctor, could you please ask the question?
Yeah, thanks Farhad for such a wonderful presentation. In fact, it's an eye-opener for a lot of organizations. And my question is, you're talking about so many parameters, and by and large you covered all. And what about this parameter where the top management directives we are focusing on, maybe on the vision or the mission or the goal objectives, where the compassion word is there, and so that, you know, it's just not preaching, but the practicing from the top management, and then the compassion may be embedded in the top management policies or vision, mission, and finally it may trickle down to at the bottom, something like that. That parameter of involvement of the top management, I was thinking if you can think about. What's your opinion about that?
Mr. Mohammed Farid, I thank you very much for listening and for paying such careful attention to exactly. And you're right, the senior management point is not over there, because if you're looking at it from a cultural perspective, and with all our cultural initiatives, we generally start off with the top. And again, if you notice, the messaging over here was more towards the organization as a whole, which means all the way from the board level down the line, this thing needs to translate. There needs to be 100% buy-in, and perhaps things like role model for compassion. You actually have a role model of compassion coming down from the top. So for example, if you're looking at an individual organization, we'd start off right from the top. For that matter, quite a few companies, even after we went through the survey, wanted to introduce a culture of compassion, and our suggestion was you start from the top. Because like any initiative that you could start, be it compassion or anything else, if you really want change, it needs to come from the top. So I agree with you 100%, but as opposed to having it as an indicator if the top is part of it, it is assumed that it starts off from the top and trickles down. So that is what my small suggestion is.
Dr. Mohammed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thanks, Ali, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for always asking the questions, Doctor. Let me move to the question box. We have two more questions. Is there any study available to know which are the top 5 most compassionate organizations in the world?
To the best of my knowledge, there is no research as such. If anything, this was the first questionnaire that was ever developed and shared with people. It took about 4 years to develop this questionnaire. Sadly, we don't have any written endorsements, but we've got endorsements from very leading figures and authorities globally, including Karen Armstrong herself, the International Center for Compassion Organizations. So if I doubted that you would find any other questionnaire or any other study of the kind that you've just seen over here. Speaking of 5 organizations that are most compassionate, well, there are a lot of companies that are going through it. If you ask me, an organization at the top right now, probably Google. But if you're asking for the indicators and things, you see, it is still in transition. As I said, it's a very, very, very new field. Probably the first compassion in business conference was held last year in May 2013. So this is how new the concept is. I mean, just think about it. If a leading education institute in South Asia turns around and says that compassion has nothing to do with business, could just show the mentality and the kind of awareness that people have about the subject. So I could give you the name of Google for one, which I know for sure is working on compassion, but there is no research which indicates what are the top 5 industries. At least today there isn't. And hopefully in the next 4 years, 3 to 4 years, we'll probably have it. Inshallah.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a question from Marion Sini. Do you have or know about any material available which could be used in face-to-face workshops for both managers and regular individual contributors?
Oh, there is a lot of research and a lot of material. For our business unit, CQ, that I introduced in the beginning, has a complete team that is going through research. And again, stemming from the earlier question also, as we heard, because there is no, to the best of our knowledge, we don't have anything which is very concrete and available. We are going through a lot of research and a lot of material and a lot of exercises. If anything, the 12 steps that you just seen could actually be a training program in itself. One, for example, awareness. This person who's asked this question about things that they can use in training programs for managers, if you would do some research on mindfulness, in particular, you will find a lot of information. For empathy, you would find a lot of information and things. So again, what we've also done is we did not want to come up with a questionnaire and thereby only leading to our business. What we wanted was something so simple that once you know what is the level of compassion in your own organization, you could go and research for material on specific areas and develop that. So there is a lot of research, there's a lot of material available online, on Google as well, but if you ask me off my cuff right now, I can't share it. But the link that I shared with you, hang on, I can guide you from that. The report, the sites that I shared with you, if you go to that site, you'll probably get information from that. Can they see my slide as well?
We can see it.
Oh, good. This site over here, compassion.org. If you download this particular report, in the connection of sources and places from where you could get material. A lot of text.
Okay, we have the question from Brother Hamid Ali also. Do we need to change the language terminology also? For example, we see people as resources. We call them human resource. Can't we have a better word for people who work with us? As far as I know, the history of the word human resource, it was also used for by slave traders.
Yes, I agree 100%. Call them, the latest one is human capital, human technology, people, human beings, call them what you may. But again, my coach used to say, just because you park a Rolls-Royce, just because you park a Suzuki in a Rolls-Royce showroom doesn't make it a Rolls-Royce. Moral of the story, it is good to rename them as something else, but then also treat them accordingly differently. If you can't do that, there is no point in changing. For example, a lot of organizations, it became a fad about 10 years back, calling managers as coaches. And you had these loads of interventions and initiatives calling managers as coaches. Just because you call them coaches did not necessarily, quote, did not necessarily convert those nasty behavioral managers into coaches. So I agree. We could use something else. As I said, human capital is something which is very hot these days and will probably evolve. So I would request my friend to share with us some ideas. Let's brainstorm and create something. And that's where innovation comes in. So let's sit together and create and make it something more exciting. Ali?
And we have one last question. What should be some of the measurable SMART KPIs to assess how compassionate an employee as an individual is? Any particular example you could give how to assess and equally set forth the goals?
It is a relatively lengthy, so this subject is also very, very big, and that is why if you notice I've actually rushed through, unlike my previous webinar, I actually rushed through this very quickly because there are a lot of things and there are a lot of things that you may like to think about and explore. Let me give you an idea. What you need to do is basically, and this is a very, it's an answer you need to think about. I've always recommended linking these things to a performance management system of an organization. And if you, interestingly enough, if you go by the process, you can link your performance management system down straight to the values of the organization very, very tangibly, which means all the training programs and everything that is done directly to and impacts your performance management system. Looking at compassion, you could take these indicators, these are actionable behaviors. If you could set them up as indicators, put them down into a performance management system, just the way that you have your performance management system, incorporate these into these indicators into that, you will be able to quantify some of them. But again, it's not 100% definitive science that this is where it is. There'll always be a plus minus of 1 or 2. Therefore, you really need to make the effort from your own organizational perspective to clarify as much as you can. But these indicators need to be part of, just for example, you have behavioral part of the performance management system. If your performance management system you think is foolproof, so can compassion be. And again, there's some things, for example, you have an innovation index within your organization. See how much innovation happens in your organization. That could be a good testament of whether you have a compassionate organization or no. Look at the number of people leaving. 42%, if 42% of the people are dissatisfied with the employee engagement survey, this is also an indicator that something is not going right. You try giving people that opportunity. Look at the absenteeism rates of people. So there are quite a few indicators that you could set up looking at your organization and your business strategy. One of the reasons I find it very difficult to give indicators is because every strategy and every organization is different. And you can't really say which one is right and which one is wrong. But if you sit down, yes, you can create indicators just the way that you create, if you have created successfully your performance management system indicators. Ali?
Hey, Farhad, that really brings us towards the end of the webinar. Any concluding remarks that you'd like to give before we dismiss out?
Concluding remarks, I would just like people to think about compassion, and before trying to change others, begin with self. Look at your own relationships, where I've agreed, one of our friends, brother, I think Muhammad Fareed highlighted that senior management needs to be part of it, agreed, but according to Jim Collins, you can also create pockets of greatness within your own organization. If you are creating pockets of greatness, see what happens to people down the line from your department or your level of seniority downwards. Compassion is a global movement. it requires every individual to play its role. It goes beyond, because if customer engagement is dependent upon employee engagement is dependent on self-engagement. This again is a relatively new theory. If you go online, you'll start looking for it, you'll find a lot of material on the concept of self-engagement. So my only concluding remarks is that think about compassion, see how you can help people accelerate. Because getting the most out of employees in terms of productivity, creativity, and excellence depends on only one thing, which is relationships. The key lies in knowing that these relationships are built on a high degree of trust. This can be cultivated amongst people within an organization and across an organization. That is strength of interdependence as well as interdependence that needs to be leveraged on for success. So if you notice, I'm using all hardcore business terms, but under the umbrella of compassion. So compassion is not something that people need to fear, need to think of how to make it a daily practice. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Mail, for giving me the opportunity, and Ali for moderating this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Really want to thank you, Mr. Farhad Karamally, on behalf of Mail for this very interesting and wonderful presentation. And thank you all of those who participated in this webinar. I've already pasted the link from where you can download the soft copy of this presentation that was illustrated in the webinar. It is on community.mile.org. We are recording it, and the recorded version will be uploaded in the next couple of days. So please stay tuned to community.mile.org for our upcoming webinars and how to access the archive section as well. So I will leave you guys with the response that Mr. Warren Buffett gave to one of the person who asked him the question. The question was, what do you look at while interviewing a prospect candidate for employment? And Mr. Warren Buffett replied, when it comes to look, I don't look either the degrees from Harvard or not. I rather look into their eyes and see how passionate they are. So that is what I think it's all about, being compassionate. So thank you very much, Farhad, for an interesting presentation, and thank you once again, all of you. So you all have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're logging from. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship, MILE.